In a world where transmission is 100 years old, like, Priyanka paints a problem.
Exactly. Number one.
Hello and welcome to the California Dreamshot podcast, where we are digging deep on the issues and policies that shape California and talking about how we can build an economy that works for everyone. This is indeed the podcast for the people who move California forward. We have two main topics that we'll be covering on these podcasts. We have industrial and energy policy with me and my co-host Priyanka Mohanty. And the other topic is resilience policy with Nuantara Key and Carolyn Kuski, who are recording theirs as we speak. So let's get to it. Very excited to be here with all of you today. Hey, Priyanka, how are you doing today?
You know, I am good, Kate. I'm good. It's been a busy couple of weeks. Lots of work as always, as I'm sure you can relate to.
Endless work.
But I will say, in the spirit of us talking about the World Cup, and me, frankly, always talking about the World Cup to everyone that I talk to, I went to Seattle for a real melting pot of a game. It was Egypt versus Iran.
Wow, that must have been amazing.
It was amazing. It was a real mishmash of different politics, and it was Pride Night, so there was a lot of
a fascinating thing for that specific game. That must have been very interesting.
It was very, very interesting. It was a lot of political protests, and then you just had the Egyptian fans kind of dressed up in full pharaoh gear. So it was really fun. And then I am headed to Bordeaux tomorrow for a conference. It's the Society for the Advancement of Socioeconomics. I'm going to be talking about our work, industrial policy.
I love that you're talking about socioeconomics in Bordeaux. Like, that is hilarious. You're like, I will be sipping wine while speaking of the hoi polloi.
The hoi polloi, the canals. And it's going to be a heat wave, which I am sort of nervous about. You know, this whole theme of this episode is, and the theme of our work is how climate change is going to transform society. Talk about transformation. European households, 20% of them only have AC.
Yeah, well, they're also kind of like socially, like they're culturally opposed to it in a lot of places. Like they're having this fascinating conversation about whether they should embrace it or given the impacts on climate change. Not even a thought here in the US, I feel like. We're just like, we need to get AC. It's just a very different conversation.
I mean, it's also funny because I think the rest of the world, like I think about the global south, and like if you can afford an AC, you're getting an AC. You know what I mean? So I think that's going to be interesting. How are you? You're also headed to Europe soon, aren't you?
Well, I was just traveling and now I'm going to travel again. So I just got back. I was on a whirlwind trip last week. I was in Portland, Oregon for a meeting with Western state NGOs and funders working on energy issues, which was fascinating. And then I went to DC for a 24-hour trip. I'm part of a task force on grid reliability and on kind of grid security, which was super interesting. And yeah, I'm about to go on vacation. So I'm leaving this Saturday for Europe. Also, everyone's going to Europe. And I'm super excited. My daughter is on the U.S. Women's Ultimate Frisbee team. So I'm very excited about that. We're going to see the World Cup of Ultimate Frisbee in Spain.
That's awesome.
So very excited. All of you ultimate players out there, there is a World Cup of Ultimate Frisbee. So you too can dream.
You need to come and report back on what the vibes are there. Like what, I know. What are the different teams? Like which nations are being represented in this meeting of global Frisbee players?
I mean, it's totally fascinating. I don't know the answer to that, but I will know a lot more next time we talk. I did get swag, so I have my full USA team swag with my daughter's number on it and everything. So I'm very excited. I will send pictures. I will say DC was really interesting. First of all, lots of prep for the America 250. So that's a whole conversation. But also, everywhere I went, like in the airport, in the metro stations, there were billboards for this new Meta America's Workforce Academy, which like anyone listening to any podcasts besides this one, because why would you listen to any other podcast? But there's been a ton of ads for it. And it's super interesting. It's like this major AI company investing in, I think, training for trades jobs, which maybe is so that they can make sure enough people can build the data centers and the grid, but also feels like an acknowledgement that like AI is changing the whole economy and there probably will be more trades jobs. So I just thought it was really, really interesting. I'm curious whether you've encountered this new meta workforce thing.
So I looked it up after you mentioned it to me, and I also happened to hear it on every podcast after we talked about it. Here's my thing, okay? Shout out to the building trades and their impressive training programs that they already have established in every single part of this country. And that was what it was really confusing to me about this.
Fair.
You know?
Do you know, actually, Priyanka, you probably know this number better than me, but I believe that NAB2, which is the big National Association of Building Trades, I think they spend like $2 billion with a B on training every year from, member dues, which is pretty incredible if you think about it.
I mean, it's amazing. And their models are amazing too. You know, they're thinking about high school programs. They are working with folks who are justice impacted. They have like women in trades programs. They're really reaching out to every corner of the universe. And so that was my big red flag with this was, okay, Meta wants to invest in the non-union pipe fitters training program. Like we already invented the wheel here a little bit. And, you know, you and I will talk about this at some point. It just feels like another grift coming from a company that is changing the way our economy looks and is maybe grappling with that in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think we will do shows on this for sure, because it's like there's a whole conversation to be had here around, look, some would say, if we have all these existing training programs, why are companies telling us that there's a shortage of workers, right, for these manufacturing jobs and these trades jobs? Is there actually a shortage of workers? Is there a shortage of good jobs? Like, what is the actual situation? Why is that the number one thing everybody always says when you have conversations about, like, why is it hard to build in California, for instance?
Yeah, we will. That's a heady one. That's a heady topic. Let's pin that one.
Yes. Well, we'll be talking a little about that today with our guest, but I think it's super important. And it's sort of, broadening out kind of makes me want to talk for a minute about, why we're doing this podcast in the first place. Like, why did we decide it was smart to do a podcast on this sort of whole area of like industrial and energy transition? And why are we calling it Dreamshot, right? What are we trying to achieve? And I've been thinking about this a lot and, thinking about this kind of tension that just feels like it keeps coming up around, we need to do an energy transition to a new economy that is still industrial. Because it's not like we're transitioning back to an agrarian economy with a bunch of like subsistence farming. Like we still have an industrial economy. It's in fact even more industrial because it's like more and more interconnected and digital. We need to build a bunch of stuff to achieve our climate goals and to create an economy that works for people and creates jobs and creates prosperity across all these regions. And that's kind of a vision, like I can say that. But I think we actually have to talk more honestly about what that means and what's working and what's hard and where the trade-offs are and where we could learn and where we could do better and maybe look at other places a little. California doesn't always do that as much as maybe we could, but like we are huge, we're a global leader, but we also could learn from others. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. So it kind of, to me, relates back to this conversation about Meta and their new training program. It's almost like we're finally coming around to this recognition of like, oh, we spent 50 years saying the world is flat and other places can do all the manufacturing. And we're going to be a knowledge economy where everything is clean and all jobs are paid well and everyone is getting a 4-year college degree. And I think we're coming around to like, actually, we do need to reinvest in a bunch of these things like the trades and infrastructure manufacturing and like, but we have to do that differently. We have to learn from the mistakes of doing that. And that's just complicated. I mean, I think we'll be talking a lot about this on the pod, but how do we do it differently? How do we deal with the distrust that was created by not doing it all that well the first time we built an industrial economy? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, it's about climate and it's just about being in the 21st century. Every country around the world is investing in an industrial policy of some sort. And I think what I'm really excited about for us is really connecting those dots of, why is industrial policy climate policy? Why is it the next phase of climate action? I mean, you and I talk about this all the time. I think we need to get serious about building the political will for everyday people to get behind this massive whole of economy energy transition that we're undergoing. And the way that we do that is an economic agenda. California Forward talks about this all the time. And I think we're in such a moment where things are deeply unaffordable. We're pretty disconnected from the goods that we consume. We are experiencing climate shocks. We need to build more structures around economic and fiscal resilience, right? And there's a lot of answers that allow us to look back at our past and see a time in which we had a productive sector of the economy that was based in hard industry, the benefits that created for people, and also the way in which we sort of created that parasocial relationship to an economy. It was real for people, right? And working in an oil refinery wasn't just an abstract thing. It was people's livelihoods. They were connected to the production of energy that powered our homes, powered our cars. And so that sort of tangibility, I think, is part of industrial policy that I'm really excited to dig in with you. And there is so much negativity in the world these days. Yeah. I think we need a positive vision, right? Like, that's what I'm excited to paint here with you is, what's the positive vision for the future that we see if we make these investments, if we, like you said, do that retrospective, what went right, what can we do differently, how do we build new systems and new infrastructure, and how can that really benefit people? I think that's kind of exciting. And so, I think that's part of what we're trying to do here is paint that positive vision. And, the theme of this episode, and I'm sure episodes to come, is really around change.
Yep.
And the best way that we can do to prepare for change is be honest and have conversations about how we prepare for it, right? And what do we need to do? What steps do we need to take to make sure that we're not totally waylaid by the host of climate impacts, but also everything that comes with that? AI is a big topic of conversation. So anyways, that's what I'm excited to talk about.
No, I love that. It's like change is coming, and that requires us to think differently about the framework systems underlying it, like the infrastructure, the grid, the foundational stuff, some of the financing systems, honestly, too. And then also it requires us to have a vision about what we're going toward. I sometimes think the transition conversation is either get stuck in, no, these are all the things we have now that we want to hold on to because we're afraid to lose them. Or it gets stuck in a sort of we've magically skipped ahead to a vision of the future and a set of goals for the future without really thinking about what is needed in between. And I do like the idea of us being about a real vision of how to get from here to there, which is brings a ton of opportunity and also some trade-offs that I increasingly just think we have to be super honest about. So totally. I love that. I mean, in any case, big changes are ahead for the state, for the country, for the nation, for the world. And I think it's important to set up kind of where we are today, going back to where are we today? Where are we trying to go? And kind of where are we today? What's the state of California? We've got some really interesting tensions, right? We're the richest state and the richest country in the world, and we're the fourth largest economy. I just heard we were fifth again. I just heard somebody on a call the other day say we were back to fifth. I don't know if that's true, but I did hear that.
How do you even measure that? I mean,
it's all about Germany, man. Where's Germany? What was the question? Well, in Japan, Germany and Japan are the contenders at our level. So it's always about them. Because it's always US and China are above us, and then we're somewhere in the next three, right?
Well, in that, it's really interesting. I go to India all the time. You go to India, you feel it's the fifth largest economy or the sixth largest economy in the world. Yeah. It's live, it's bustling. There are things that are happening, everywhere you go. And sometimes I'm like, is California the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world?
I don't know. Whatever metrics you use, I will say we have a lot of money coming into the economy. That is true.
Absolutely.
And we have a lot of innovation and we have a lot of growth in particularly tech, as folks know, which is exciting. We're also just a massive food producer. We're a bunch of things. But, look, this is also a state where a third of people live paycheck to paycheck. And there's a huge amount of inequality between the coastal and the inland areas and racial inequality within each of the areas. And it's just that is a story on the ground for a lot of people. The state has increased spending massively on our safety net and just our the reality of what happens when people face personal disaster, you lose your house, you have a medical emergency, you have some setback, but also statewide disaster, fires, floods. Those things are happening more and more often. We are less and less able to deal with them. So that's just a really important thing about where we are today. And then, I'm a planner by training, so I always think about land use patterns too. And we've sort of exacerbated those issues. We've not thought about land use in conjunction with these larger economic issues. So we have, fewer multifamily homes and starter homes for people. We're sprawling into wildland urban interface. We have long drive times. So even if you're spending less on housing, you might be spending more on transportation, particularly with gas prices where they are right now. So there's just a lot going on here. And underneath all of that, there were decisions made. Like we made the decision as a nation and as a state to push for four-year college degrees for everyone, to kind of build an economy with a lot of innovation and a lot of consumer spending and a little bit less in the middle. We made decisions to move away from trade. We made decisions to have a tax system that makes local government push for property taxes and more housing build and less industrial build. There's a lot of intentionality behind this. But it's a complex story. It's sort of a tale of two Californians, right? All these things are true, that we're the richest and that we have all these issues underneath.
Totally. I mean, and I'll just name a couple of other sort of dynamics coming to the fold. At least for me, I think we're also politically in a moment where, not do or die, maybe that sounds too dramatic, but people don't want more Band-Aids, right? People don't want more Band-Aid solutions. People don't want more tinkering, a little bit over here, a tax credit over there, a means-tested program over there. We are kind of running up into a moment where our systems are old. Our infrastructure is old. Our politics feel like they need some juice, to put it lightly. And that is really interesting to me. We have a massive technological transformation happening. I think obviously people talk about AI and, California is in many ways the center of AI. California is also in many ways the center of all this exciting clean tech that we can use to really transform our systems. And so, like you said, there's both the good and the bad, the opportunity associated with where we've been brought to as a result of those choices, and maybe realizing that those choices, we need to make different choices, right? And to me, the one thing that really exemplifies this, especially if we're thinking about energy and the transition, it's quite literally setting things on fire, I will say, is our transmission system. We don't think about the poles and the wires. It's almost a given to us. Of course, I'm charging my laptop right now, and I have the lights on, and I have all of this infrastructure, but it's a pretty calcified and old system, right? It was designed for a different era, and so I kind of want to just paint a problem for you, because I think it'll be important for us to talk about a little bit before we bring our guest on. One, California residents pay the second highest electricity rates in the country. Since 2019, California has experienced the largest increase in electric rates in the country, with residential electricity prices rising nearly 39% over the last 6 years. That didn't happen in a vacuum. There are real reasons for this. And that's really, coming back to our transmission infrastructure, our ability to add new load to the grid, particularly cheaper renewables to the grid, and the sort of the way in which we've, socialized wildfire costs into our grid costs. That's also a topic for another day. But I think what's really important about that is that these costs and these additions are going to keep happening, right? So we can't continue on a trajectory where we add more load, we electrify more, we add more wildfire mitigation costs, and we just keep adding it to ratepayers because our system can't really handle that much. It is really critical that we think about what that means for our grid infrastructure. I mean, every major fire in California is connected to our grid in some way, shape, or form, right? So this is not abstract. This is not just for people who are developers or tech bros. This affects all of us. So then on top of that, you're adding renewables to the grid, right? You are electrifying all your cars. That means people have to charge their cars. We already knew, for the past 75 years, past 50 years, we have not added new demand to our system. So we've been kind of in this stasis for a little bit.
Say more about that, actually. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, for a long time, we have added more energy to the grid in aggregate. I know always talking about this makes me feel kind of like that meme of that guy with the chalk who's scribbling, and he's kind of like with one eye squinting. We've added we've certainly added more energy to our grid, more power to our grid, but we've really mastered energy efficiency. And so everything that we added to the grid was very efficiently added. We were able to use demand response. We're able to use all these different kinds of tools to make it such that in aggregate, the amount of load that was on the grid was pretty minimal additions, right? We're kind of going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. That changes when you're suddenly adding gigawatt scale hyperscalers and data centers, the size of cities and their energy load. And it's a global phenomenon, right? Load is being added everywhere. We always knew that was going to happen. But I think the data center piece of this makes it particularly crucial and pressing that we manage and upgrade our grid system, because there's a lot of things being added onto what feels like a Jenga pile, and you just pull one block out of it, the whole thing comes down.
It's interesting. I was just reading somewhere that if we had met our projected electrification numbers by today, we actually would have been hitting similar additions to the grid. So like we do, to your point, we actually have been a little slower on electrification than we thought, but we now have this data center load. So you look at these charts and they all have flat demand. And then all of a sudden you get this giant spike, like right now.
and on the one hand, it kind of makes the case for clean energy. You and I talk about this a lot too, right? Like solar and storage is the cheapest and fastest option for us to add load to the grid. Except that our poles and wires are super outdated and we don't really produce any of those components here domestically. So we kind of need to import everything. I read this Bloomberg article that talked about how we imported over $400 billion in parts last year to just upgrade our grid system. That's an insane
amazing
cost.
Yeah, and it is happening everywhere. I mean, I was like in a national conversation about this with a bunch of think tank wonky people, and everybody's talking about, I think going from where we've been, which is like, what's the little fix we can do here or there to deal with this problem? How do we think about reconductoring, existing wires so they're more efficient? How do we do demand response? How do we add a little bit of capacity? And now actually you're starting to hear people talk about how the entire grid was built for a different era and is no longer fit for purpose, right? There's a need for fundamental reform to the system. And I think that it's a really interesting question where California plays in that. We're like ground zero for so many of these issues. We have massively increasing demand, like you said, like we have, I think, the third highest concentration of data centers, right? We're increasing climate risk here. We have PG&E's territory is both one of the largest and the riskiest of any utility territory. And then we have this affordability issue. So we are facing all the same challenges in a microcosm that everyone else is facing. What can we model for the rest of the country? What can we learn from the rest of the world? What can we model for the rest of the world is always the big question for California. Mm-hmm. So this question of transmission and grid and what California's role is a great setup for our main guest.
Yes, we are very excited to welcome the Assemblymember Cottie Petrie-Norris. She represents California's 73rd Assembly District. You might know them as the cities of Contra Mesa, Irvine, Tustin.
I think it's Costa Mesa, right?
Oh, is it Costa Mesa? Costa Mesa. I'm showing my NorCal, so there you go. That's what this is. She's a businesswoman. She's a mom. She's a community leader. She was elected, I believe, to the state assembly in 2018. And she has really been a champion on energy issues. She has secured funding for projects across Orange County. She's passed such incredible legislation to also protect our coast, improve access to healthcare, around safety, around veterans issues. She is the chair of the very important Assembly Committee on Utilities and Energy. And she also serves on so many other committees at the same time, which is amazing. Economic development, growth, and household impact, insurance, privacy, consumer protection, as well as the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change Policies. She is behind 3 bills now up for consideration in the state Senate. And so we wanted to have her on the show to discuss one that is really relevant to our conversations, which is really about how California can pave the path for the future of our transmission system.
Awesome. It sounds great. And I love, Assemblymember, that you're on all the committees that relate to everything we like to talk about. So economic development, utilities, energy, climate, it's all the things. So really thrilled to have you. And welcome to the California Dreamshot podcast.
Thank you so much, Kate and Priyanka. Really excited for the opportunity to spend some time together.
We're super excited to have you because you're sort of the talk of the town right now, given that you chair the Utilities and Energy Committee at a time when the whole state is talking about energy costs, utility structures, wildfire impacts, affordability. Big question, but what are your big priorities in that role in this coming year?
Well, Kate, as you said, this really is a pivotal moment for California. We have incredibly ambitious, incredibly important clean energy goals. And we've got a monumental task before us in order to deliver on those goals. And I think most importantly, to deliver on those goals in a way that balances what I call the three legs of our energy stool. So we are working to build an energy supply for California that is sustainable. It's also got to be reliable, and it's got to be affordable. So my North Star really has always been ensuring that we're advancing an approach and a strategy that does all three of those things.
Yeah, and that's not easy, right? I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot here is sort of the trade-offs, right? And it isn't super easy to do all those things. Like, we have to invest a lot to get to a more reliable system, which means spending money, which means it has to come from somewhere. So how are we thinking about that balance? That's a huge task for you.
And we are in a moment where we're really making these generational investments over the next 20 years as we transition our economy to a clean energy economy. We are going to be increasing what's called generation capacity across our electricity grid by more than 300%. We're also going to be increasing transmission by something like 350%. And these are, as I said, these are generational investments, and we've got to figure out, I think, ways that the analogy I use is it can be kind of like a snake swallowing a giant egg, which we got to make sure that we're like, spreading that out, because the investments that we're making are going to have benefits for decades really to come. And so I've always been really focused on making sure that as we're making these investments, we're doing it in a way that is most efficient and most cost effective for California ratepayers.
I might just take that as sort of an opportunity to ask you, you've introduced a really exciting bill in the legislature. Some folks know it as AB 2516 if you're hip on the ledge tracker. Others know it as the California Grid Manufacturing Initiative. So I'm just wondering, maybe can you talk about a little bit your intentions with this bill, what it's about, what you see as the benefit, caveating, of course, that I represent an organization called the UAW Center for Manufacturing a Green Economy, or CMGE, and I believe the UAW, which is the United Auto Workers Union, is one of the main backers of this bill. So I will just be totally transparent about where my allegiances lie. But even with that, I think it's very exciting, and we'd love to hear from you. Sort of,
we're on record supporting it, so we have allegiances on this one too. But we'd love to hear more because it's super. We did that because it's super important. So love to hear more from you.
Well, and I'm so excited for the opportunity to talk about this bill, because I think that the vision for this is really, really exciting. So we talked about some of the challenges that we're facing. We talked about high electricity bills. We talked a little bit about the magnitude of what we need to achieve as we transition to a clean energy future. Something that I think we don't always think about is that what's driving some of these price increases, what's making these projects take too long, is the actual physical equipment that makes the grid work. So transformers, cables, switchgears, circuit breakers. And right now we are in the midst of a supply chain crisis for this equipment, not just in California, across the United States and around the entire world. We've seen lead times go from what used to be 1 to 2 months to nearly 3 years. And prices are spiking from like 50 to 100%. So it's really reached this kind of crisis moment. And what we have done, I think, with this bill, with the concept of the Grid Manufacturing Initiative, is to really flip those challenges and find an opportunity. The vision is a really simple concept that we will use California's size and our purchasing power to drive down costs, to speed up delivery, and to create thousands of high quality, great paying jobs along the way. And so I was really excited. I think that it was the UAW in partnership with a couple of other organizations who commissioned an in-depth study to look at this and figure out how could we capitalize on the opportunity. And the study found that we could create more than 6,000 good paying jobs, including 2,500 direct manufacturing positions, as well as save California ratepayers billions and billions of dollars over the next 2 decades. So really, really excited about this. Like, we're talking lower cost for ratepayers, good jobs for Californians, and the reliable supply chain that we need to build the grid that our clean energy future depends on.
I mean, it's also such a model for what is possible, right? Really showing that we can invest and shape the future and the markets that we think are a priority for us. So I really commend that that vision, and I'm also curious, how does this kind of connect to the challenges we're seeing around AI and data center build out? You mentioned our transmission crisis, our transmission challenges. They're not just California specific, right? They're happening nationally, they're happening internationally. And so I'm curious if maybe you could connect some dots for our viewers about why this is so important, given the changes that we're seeing around AI, around data centers, and of course, around our energy transition.
The explosion in AI, the explosive growth of data centers, that's just added additional demand on our grid. And we know that that is going to continue to increase. So when I talked about some of the supply chain challenges that we are experiencing, as I said, around the world, it's not kind of this abstract infrastructure problem. The price spikes in just 1 year of utility spending in 2024 will cost California ratepayers something like $4 billion over the next 4 decades. So if we had this supply chain crisis solved, we could have saved Californians $4 billion. It's also causing delays to our clean energy future. Something like 13 gigawatts of renewable energy and battery storage projects are just stuck right now because the transmission equipment that they depend on is being delayed. That's enough. Like, that project pipeline is enough to power 10 million homes. And so the stakes around this really are incredibly high, not just in some theoretical sense, but as a kitchen table issue for California families.
I was going to say, I was just in DC last week and was at a grid security kind of closed door meeting, and literally half of it was talking about these supply chain backlogs and what a big issue it is for the data centers, but also just for other things that are stresses on the grid, right? Like just electrification. If we want to meet these electric vehicle electrification, home electrification goals, the reality of the need of more and more of the state to have air conditioning because of extreme heat impacts. And so this is just, it's a real bottleneck. I did want to ask you, one question that comes up a lot in the economic development world is always, people face some challenges in building things in California. You're trying to deal with that. What are you thinking about in terms of ways to get that to jumpstart here? Like, how do we leverage what you said, our purchasing power, our consumer power, our demand side, when, look, we're right next door to Nevada, and they've done an amazing job, frankly, of doing clean energy manufacturing. Like, how are we finding that path toward competitiveness as a state?
And it's such an important question, because I think a lot of the times we're seeing where California is, not just in the clean energy sector, but really in so many diverse industries. California is the world's kind of research and development laboratory.
Yep. And innovation engine, right? That's what we do.
And our innovation economy is the envy of the world. It's a big part of why we are the world's 4th largest economy. That innovation has shaped the world that we live in, whether we're talking about technology products or biotech or clean energy or the life sciences. But we're also seeing that a lot of the time that innovation happens here, but then once a company is getting to scale, once they're actually manufacturing, once they're in a position of actually creating lots of jobs, they are going out of state. And so I think it's a really important time for us to take a hard look at why that's happening and identify the barriers where we can remove them. And I think, for this piece of the puzzle, I think it is going to require action, not just kind of on the demand side, but on the supply side. And the way that we're thinking about that is to structure some narrowly tailored incentives so that we can attract manufacturers and incentivize them to set up shop and build stuff here in California.
Can I ask, because this is a live debate, and this podcast is really about industrial policy, so I think both Kate and I have opinions about the role of, for example, clean energy manufacturing in sort of, let's call it the next phase of climate action. Can you tell us, why is it important to reshore or localize this type of manufacturing? Why is that a priority? What are the benefits that come from that sort of thing?
I think that the benefits of reshoring manufacturing here in America and here in California are, I guess, many and important. So, number one, it's about jobs, which create economic growth and prosperity for the state of California. Number two, it is about energy security and ensuring that we have our energy future in our hands. We cannot be entirely reliant on a supply chain that's outside of this country and expect to have the critical infrastructure needs that we have met on the timelines and with the price tag that we need. And so I think the stakes around this conversation are incredibly high. And we're in a moment right now in our clean energy transition where I think the rubber is really meeting the road. So I sometimes joke that, for 20 years, people that had this job before me, kind of decades ago, they could kind of come to the legislature and set incredibly ambitious goals and say, that's right, in 40 years, we're going to do something really, really hard. And then they'd kind of like pat themselves on the back and go about their business. But now, all those chips are coming due, and we are having to figure out how to make this happen in a way that works for California in the long term, and it's also got to work for California in the now. And so we're having, not just about this bill, but we are having so many, I think, really fascinating conversations in the legislature right now about how we make that clean energy future a reality and how we make that a reality in a way that, like I said, is affordable, sustainable, and reliable for Californians, and how we make that a reality in a way that creates more opportunity and more economic growth for the state. But all of that, I think, Kate, you started, or one of you, Priyanka or Kate, you said early in one of your comments, you said, this is really hard. Yeah. And I also think, we got to be honest with Californians.
We do. Totally.
That this is hard. We're not just going to wave a magic wand and be able to, increase the grid by 300%. This is hard. We've got to be strategic. We've got to be intentional. But I think this is some of the most fascinating policy work that I'm able to do as a legislature, as a member of the legislature. So I love it.
Love that you're thinking about implementation. I think that it really is hard, right? Going from the bill gets signed and then everyone sort of says, yay, and takes a picture to really digging in, right? How does it get implemented by the executive branch? Who's in charge of it? What is how are we communicating it to people that are trying to invest in California? How are we continually tracking what's working and what's not working? I mean, these are really the big questions. And love that you're focusing not only on implementation, but also, honestly, we think, affordability is the word of the day and year, I feel like, everywhere. And Priyanka and I talk a lot about how affordability is not just the cost of the thing on your bill. It's also whether you can afford the thing. It's about whether you have a job, whether you have economic security, whether you have economic mobility, and that you're trying to bring together those two pieces is super cool as you're trying to think about, what does this actually look like in the real economy? I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, we've had a lot of, there's been a lot of conversations around energy and affordability. And I think that, there's been news articles saying that, Democratic states are pulling back from their clean energy ambitions because of a focus on affordability. And I think I have a somewhat different take on that, which is I think the more that you care about our clean energy future, the more you need to care about affordability for Californians today. Because the reason that California has been able to lead on climate action for so long hasn't been because there's like a handful of policymakers that care about it. It's because we've had the support, the bipartisan support of Californians for so long. And if we don't keep a laser focus on affordability, I think we risk losing that support. And I think, even to get, I guess, even sort of a broader take on it, when we think about the role that California can have in building the clean energy future, not just in California, but around the nation and around the world, it's really important that we are taking action that makes California a model that people want to follow.
Totally.
Because if other states and countries look at what's happening in California and they say, oh my gosh, prices are out of control, nobody can afford that, they're going to look at us as a cautionary tale.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We need to be an inspiration, not a cautionary tale. And I think so we got to take the long view on how we deliver on all of these things together.
I mean, it's extremely well said. I'll leave you with two fascinating polls that I saw recently. Kate's heard me say this a million times. One of them is, a vast majority of people actually think we can tackle the climate crisis and affordability at the same time. So I really just appreciate you sort of naming that. I think that's what most people believe. And to your point about making sure Californians feel the benefits of all of the progress we've made, I do worry about the backslide or the sort of scapegoating of climate action if we don't make it affordable for people, and polling comes out and says from the Public Policy Institute that the vast majority of Californians think that the state is moving in the wrong direction, right? That's kind of scary in a lot of ways because we've done so much. Like you said, we've been a leader in so many ways. And so I just applaud you for being ambitious and creative in the way that you're thinking about these issues, because I think it's really needed for California. And like you said, I think it's going to influence how we think about conversations to come in the next 2 years in 2028 and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll say for me as a California policymaker, when we see those polls, it's like the hardest thing.
I'm sure you're like, we're trying.
Yeah.
But we've got to take that seriously, and we've got to take people's concerns seriously. And I think, the thing that I think is really important to continue, frankly, particularly in this, political environment with so much misinformation, I think continue to remind, ourselves of, our constituents of, is the ravages of the climate crisis are dangerous and very, very expensive. And so the reason that we have these ambitious goals is because we know that building a clean energy future is the way that we make California more sustainable. It also is the way that we make it more affordable. And so we've got to make that case and I think demonstrate that case for Californians.
That is perfect. We should record that for the intro into, we have another podcast on the same platform that's entirely about that point of building fiscal resilience and climate resilience, because I think really we can see this on a year-by-year basis, that the climate disasters are, look, the government's holding the bag on those at the end of the day. I mean, the state is paying for those and all the impacts, and we do need to get ahead of it because we won't have any money to pay for any of this other good stuff if we don't.
And I think, yes, and when the nation is holding the bag, it's like, it's all of us.
It is.
Exactly.
It is. Whether you're a ratepayer, a policyholder, or a taxpayer, it's still all the same people, right?
Exactly. 100%. Yes.
Love this. Thank you for everything you're doing. We could talk to you for hours about all the different bills, but thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for a little while today. Yeah. And we're really excited that you're leading the charge on this. Come back anytime. We'd love to have you.
Well, thank you so much. Really enjoyed spending some time with you, and look forward to the next one.
That was such a great interview. It's just, I don't know, it's always so inspiring to have like leaders who are in positions where they can actually lead and kind of help represent Californians. What stood out to you, Priyanka?
I mean, I just really appreciated her honesty around the fact that these things are hard and imperfect. We're going to talk a lot about trade-offs. I mean, even the idea of our name, the California Dreamshot, there's something sort of ambitious and speculative and imperfect, but also exciting about that. And I think that, you know, she really exemplifies sort of trying new things, being honest about trade-offs, thinking about the fact that this is hard, you know? So I appreciated her honesty. You know, a lot of folks would say, you know, this is perfect and we're just taking another step and, you know, everything is all good. And, you know, she acknowledges like we need to do right by the citizens of California. And that's what she's trying to do. I love that.
I do too. And I also really, you know, when you were doing the intro and reading off the committees, I'd forgotten about all those committees. And it's actually, it's really great that she's sort of leading on all these committees that have these overlapping approaches. So it's like energy and climate and economics. It's all the things we think need to be thought about together. She's thinking about together.
I also loved her reshoring answer. I thought that it was a great one. And it's one that more and more folks need to hear. So I'm glad that she said it for us.
You know, some states, I as folks may know, worked for former Energy Secretary, former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm in the Biden administration. And when she was governor of Michigan, she actually combined her energy and labor agencies in Michigan because of the kind of for them, the kind of historic transition from being an internal combustion engine car economy to thinking about electrification. And I just think like we have to think about those things together and even structurally think about them together. And I just love that she's in a position to be at the intersection of all those committees. So Cottie Petrie-Norris, great leader for this era that we're in, I feel like. All right, Priyanka, it is almost time for us to wrap up, which is sad because I love talking to you. But I also want to go to Europe. So, you know, balancing act. In our last episode, I asked you to save your by the numbers for this show. So share that with us now. I think it's apropos because it gets to something I've been hearing about it all the time. And we just heard about in that interview. And that is
affordability. Things are too unaffordable. That is exactly what my by the numbers is about. And actually also about internal combustion engines. So bringing it full circle. Okay. I read this in a study recently. The New York Times commissioned a report, and it has been haunting me ever since. So what do you think is the average cost of a new car in America?
Oh, that is such an interesting question because I was just on a rant the other day about how gigantic the cars are. Actually, in DC also, everyone has a giant cars.
Totally.
Anyway, so I feel like they must be really expensive. So I'm going to say like maybe as high as like $60,000.
Okay, close. Average, you know, now I'm lowballing it. Average is $50,000.
Okay, that's still really high.
For a new car.
Yeah.
$50,000.
That's really high. I mean, especially since I think that the average household in America like has a savings of less than $7,000. Like that is really a lot lot of money.
We haven't even talked about the predatory loan structure around.
Oh my God, I know.
Those prices.
That is a whole thing. Anyway.
So my second question to you, same study. How many new car models in the U.S. cost under $30K?
So available to buy in the U.S., yes?
Correct. Available to buy in the U.S.
I'm like thinking about car models. I'm like, I bet the Honda Fit is at $30,000. Maybe 2, 3?
Man, Kate, come on. Okay, so it is 4 models.
It might be. I'm so pessimistic. I'm like, it's really high and it's really low.
Are under the cost of $30,000.
Wait, only 4? Seriously?
Yeah.
What are they? Can you name them all? Name them all.
Ugh.
It is always amazing to me how much money people spend on cars. We could have a whole conversation about this, but like everyone is freaked out all the time about how much things cost. And then people buy cars that cost a lot of money, which is interesting to me. That is sadly all we have time for today. So thanks, Priyanka, as always, for being such a stellar co-host. Thank you to my dog for shaking her collar just at that moment. And see you next time.
Thank you.
California Dreamshot is a production of California Forward, produced in partnership with Pretty Good Productions. Our executive producer is Thomas Clayton Miller. Our associate producer is Sarah Walsh.